Nonviolent social action, sharing experiences in conflict, war, and with climate change. This is the first of 3 video presentations on how to achieve social change. We generally look at what kind of social change, but the emphasis we're going to give today is how, the how-to. And we're going to focus in this first video presentation on people's agency, and specifically look at women and marginalized women. But before we do that, let me introduce or give some context to my own background in terms of conflict. I am a Canadian who has lived and worked in India for more than 37 years, and I've been engaged in nonviolence among some of the most marginalized populations in India. As I work with an organization, alongside an organization called Ekta Parishad, which means Unity Forum, and this is a social organization helping with securing land rights to the poorest. Now, as is evident by the 2023 Oxfam Inequality Report in India, 5% of Indians own 60% of the wealth, and 50% of Indians own 3%. So the income inequality is an unjust distribution of resources and capital, and therefore the income inequalities has created huge social conflict. Now, that doesn't mean there hasn't been huge efforts, both by the government, but especially by non-governmental organizations that have carried out actions at the local and national level since independence. And what is intriguing about many of these actions is they have gained the participation of large numbers of people and have worked in a bottom-up and inclusive development, with an inclusive and development approach. This, of course, has been confronted by a countervailing force of top-down policy making that has been increasingly intense over the years. So, as part of Ekta Parishad's work, the efforts have been to work with landless populations to get them secure small plots of land, and then to do agriculture and other livelihood activities. By our own rapid rural appraisal in the operational areas of Ekta Parishad, about 30% of the rural populations are landless and migrate as wage earners outside their localities. And so in the interest of creating sustainable livelihoods, Ekta Parishad has been working to recover land, forest, and water, and that is Jamin, Jungle, Arjal, so that these eco-resources are in the hands of those people needing livelihood. Now, the conflict has been that with a growing population that is monetizing the resources for purposes of manufacturing goods, these resources have been taken away in large amounts from those who are dependent for their livelihood on these resources, creating huge social conflict. The government, who generally is engaged in this conflict, tends to take the side of those commoditizing the resources because it generates wealth. Now, these resource conflicts are very common across India, as they are across the global south. And Ekta has found ways to make an attempt to provide the backup needed for these nature-dependent communities to have sufficient eco-resources to generate livelihoods, and therefore are not forced to migrate, but can create greater sustainable work at home. Now, I want to give you two examples of Ekta Parishad's work. One is working at the policy level to advocate for change so that the broader policies affecting land redistribution will benefit these people who are dependent on the eco-resources. So one of the nonviolent actions that is very common in Ekta Parishad is long padyatras, what we call long marches, where huge numbers of people who are generally invisible to the government and the state because they live in remote areas join together in large marches over a lot of territory. And this has been quite successful. For instance, in 2007, in the Janadesh March, 25,000 people marched to the national capital, 350 kilometers, and was able to win some policy reform on land. When it was going too slowly in 2012, 100,000 people marched 150 kilometers in order to press the government, which in turn they received a 10-point land reform agenda which had profound change towards the land policies throughout India. And so these are examples of two large nonviolent action. But what is also happening, this is happening at the macro level, at the micro level, when landless people do acquire land, they need inputs to generate livelihood. So an organization that I'm standing in right here, which is called MJVS, Manav Jivan Vikas Samiti, which is an organization that is helping to build the institutional architecture for organic rice and wheat production in a way in two districts of Madhya Pradesh. This organic agriculture is one of the fastest growing sectors of agriculture in India, even though it still only makes up 2% of the yields in India. However, it is growing very fast. And this is important because local rural communities can have a more sustainable livelihood. They can regenerate their eco-resources to have a constant supply of food. And as this is highlighted by the fact that in the previous 2 decades, 200,000 farmers committed suicide because of debt. And that was due to the fact that they had to buy pesticides and transgenic seed, and therefore were unable to create yields that would pay back their loans, got into debt, and out of a sense of deep lack of dignity, many took their own lives. So the idea of local people doing agroecological farming has reduced social conflict considerably at the community level. So what I wanted to derive from these two examples of the long marches on the one hand and the agroecological livelihood generation on the other is all of this was driven as a bottom-up approach, and not simply people were waiting for government to make their decisions, but it gave people a sense of control over their own livelihood, their own life. And this is what has been very, very important as an example of agency, which is what I want to now turn to. I think some of the contemporary examples of nonviolent social action really can be seen by women's actions, and because they've been strong agents of change. Now, I have witnessed personally the most disadvantaged women in India and elsewhere who have, against all odds, driven a process of change. This focuses us on the importance of their agency. Malika. Malika is a young woman from a deprived Dalit background living in a village in Kodaikanal in Tamil Nadu, and has made significant local changes in her village. Significant in terms of changing the social standing, the economic standing of the village. Krishnamal Jagannathan, a 96-year-old woman who spent a lifetime waging peace against the brutal tyranny of feudal landlords, and as a Dalit, as an outcast woman, has remained steadfast in getting 14,000 deprived women housing plots. I mention these two personalities, the young Malika, the elderly Krishnamal, because I believe it conveys what Alice Walker meant when she said, hope is a woman who has lost her fear. If I think of the many women I have met in Nepal, for example, who are fighting on land rights, I think of what Buddha allegedly said: hope is the only thing stronger than fear. If we put women's struggles into a historical context in Nepal and trace their history, you would find that Nepali women were beneficiaries of a pro-democracy movement that started in Nepal in February 1990, and that they were influenced or participated in the subsequent violence of an underground movement that went on for more than 10 years of armed conflict, only coming to a civilian government, a non-military government, in 2012. In the process of a long, violent struggle, they were able to displace the monarchy, and by doing so, reduce the power of patriarchal domination. But it was the women who took the space after the civilian government came in 2012 and developed their own agency. One of the organizations, called Nepali Ekta Mahila Samaj, mobilizes and advocates for social change nonviolently. And today they are a strong nonviolent social force in Nepal society, Nepali society. And I would say anecdotally, their advancement from 1990 to today is much greater than the advancement that we've seen in parts of India or other South Asian countries. As Gandhi said, nonviolence is the instrument of the strong. If we remember the work of Vivian Silver and the organization she helped to found with associates who were Palestinian, we know that Vivian Silver is an Israeli who died at the hands of Hamas on October 7th. She set up an organization called Women Wage Peace in 2014, and that organization took on many nonviolent actions that went on for several years. Specifically, I remember the 2017 Women Wage Peace Rally, which was a 2-week march in the West Bank following the Jordan River, in a march involving 30,000 Israeli and Palestinian women. It shows how they tried to build unity across the divide in ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Women Wage Peace, as the largest grassroots organization in Israel, has its counterpart in Palestine called Women of the Sun. And these organizations have focused on economic security, education, and personal safety. It is a testament to these women that they met 2 days before Hamas struck southern Israel on October 7th. 1,500 of them met, and they had a meeting to talk about how to do more work together. Even after the attack, against all odds, these women are trying to maintain contact across this divide. I also remember the words of Sumaya Farat Nasser, who came to India in 2016 to attend one of our peace meetings. And she told us about how the Palestinian and Israeli women were confronting male decision makers in both countries. The memory of Vivian Silver and the words of Sumaya Farat Nasser continue to shine as pillars of peace building. Their light as mothers and as decision makers should flood the darkness that comes from all the narrative of revenge that we hear repeated in our everyday media. As Martin Luther King so aptly said, we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. I would add that infinite hope is there if people's agency is built, women's agency is built, if they are able to overcome challenges and be able to show the way for others. So this is the end of the first video presentation on nonviolent action.